Welcome to Reason and Theology, a show dedicated to apologetics, discussions, interviews, debates, and more. The hosts are Catholic, but also welcome charitable conversations with Orthodox, Protestants, and non-Christians. And welcome to the Reason and Theology show, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Lofton, on a Tuesday evening, doing a live stream here, joined by my co-host, William Albrecht, and also our guest here, Stefanie Lozinski. How are you, Stefanie?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you on. And I understand that you've been following the show for a while, so I appreciate you watching it too.
Oh, I'm a big fan. I just got the notification for the show because I have my live notifications on.
Awesome.
Just got on my phone. Oh, that's me.
You're
Never
up,
mind.
so your turn.
I was very excited. I was
Right.
extremely excited.
Yeah, it's great having
Thank
you. And what we're doing, so everybody is aware of the topic, we're discussing Catholic femininity and also modesty. So that's going to be our discussion here today. And let me also go ahead and introduce Stefanie. She is an unexpected Catholic convert from a very lapsed Greek Orthodox background. The history of the Crusades played a positive role in her faith journey, and she believes firmly in the rosary and that it will save the world. Readers can connect with her on Facebook and also follow her on Twitter at Steph M. Lozinski. So again, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. We've all been excited on Twitter. I was tweeting, and hopefully some of my Twitter people will find their way over.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What got you into this particular topic? Was it maybe some of the masses that you were going to, or some of the people that you were around that got you into this topic, or was it maybe something else that initiated it? You know, speaking here about Catholic modesty and Catholic femininity and things like that. What got you into that topic?
Well, my Catholic faith and going to the Latin Mass is kind of what eventually pushed me over the edge. But my journey with modesty actually really predates my conversion to Christianity in general. Yeah. It was one of those things where I would see mostly Protestant women, you know, a lot of Pentecostal women, or like the girls on like 19 Kids and Counting, you know, like the fundamentalists, I don't know, they're Baptists maybe. But, you know, it really appealed to me, just the way that these certain women dressed. And it always has, like from the time I was a very young child, even in a way, even though I don't dress in that style, the way that like Mennonite women or Amish women dress, there was something in my heart that just really connected to that way, because I knew when I would look at those people that they were kind of set apart from the world in a way. And to an extent, yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, even to an extent, that was part of when I explored Islam as in my kind of late teens age, because there was that similar thing. You know, I think that a lot of the things about, I don't agree with the excesses of modesty, you know, but I think there is a lot that's really beautiful. And I think that there is something, I think that is one of the many ways that God was calling to me long before I really knew what I was looking for, that I was this totally secular person, you know, completely secular, living a totally non-Christian life. And yet when I was honest with myself, I was like, you know, I would love to dress like those kids. You know, I'd love to dress like those women. I think that's so beautiful. And I never had the courage to do it, I guess. Like I never had the courage to like wear long skirts, and definitely not to like cover my hair. Why would I do that? Right? Like what reason would I have? Right. But yeah, eventually, so it didn't surprise me that much that when I became Catholic, I was like, okay, it'll take me some time to get there, but I can do this.
No, you brought up a couple really good points. I'm glad you brought them up. First, I agree with you. There is something attractive about Islam insofar as they are better, doing a better job at least than Christians here in the United States at preserving modesty. So I'm right there with you. You know, you mentioned that we are to be distinct. And, you know, that reminds me of scripture where Peter talks about how we're a peculiar people. Paul talks about how, you know, women are to engage in modesty and apparel and the way they adorn themselves. And, you know, I think that's something that we have lost. Now, you have also brought up that, you know, you partly got into this by your association with the Latin Mass, although not entirely due to that. But it was an influence. And that's something I've noticed as well. The Latin Mass goers generally tend to be, especially the women tend to be more feminine. Why do you think that is, that there tends to be more modesty there than in the novus ordo?
It's interesting. I mean, I think that part of it is just the general I don't know how to put it, the sacredness of the Latin
Right.
Mass. I think that for me,
Yeah.
you know, when I became Catholic, I went to the Novus Ordo that happened to be literally 2 minutes away from my house. Thanks be
Yeah.
to God. God put me and my son living in this apartment 2 minutes from a Catholic church.
Right.
Anyone who's heard my conversion story knows that I basically stumbled in there, started crying, realized the Eucharist was there. Some things led to that, but you know, so I have a lot of so much to be thankful for that parish.
Mm.
But when I started going there and I started going to daily mass, you know, first of all, there's really, you know, most people are dressed very similarly than they would be literally anywhere they go. You know, like I didn't really, you don't get that connection that, oh, this is different. You have to dress different here. And even growing up Orthodox, I was not my whole life, but a lot of my life, I went to a Greek Orthodox church, and a lot of the Greek women, at least where I live, it's very, very, very flamboyant, you know, the skirts, tons of makeup. It's very, not that they're all immodest, but I wouldn't say modesty was as emphasized, but that might have just been that parish. I'm not really saying anything about Orthodox women as a whole. But so kind of what happened to me was the first thing that really got me to kind of, I guess it's hard to explain, because as much as I was attracted to modesty, I still didn't really know what it was, in the sense that I found the dress appealing, right? Like you mentioned, even Muslim women, all of that. I found it beautiful, but I didn't think that how I was dressing was immodest, if that makes sense. It was beautiful to me in and of itself, but I didn't realize there was anything wrong with how I dressed. There was nothing to, you know, I didn't see anything wrong with my short shorts and tight tops and whatever. And when I became Catholic and I started going to mass, you know, first it was Sunday mass, and I was like, you know, I should try and really dress up for God. And growing up, my dad did tell me that, you know, we should think about it like it's more important than visiting the Queen, right? So, you know, that kind of clicked back in when even, you know, when everyone, a lot of people around me were dressing very casual. I was like, okay, you know, this is God. We're going to see God here at this church, so let's dress up. And then at daily mass, I was like, okay, I'll make more of an effort. But what really clicked for me is when I started veiling in the Novus Ordo, and I was one of two women. It took me waiting for one other woman to start veiling for me to finally get the guts to do it. I felt so awkward. I was scared. I wanted to for the longest time, but I didn't have a Latin mass. Nobody else veiled. I just felt like a lunatic. But once I did that, I think that is what made the connection for me with, wait a minute, I don't want to just be dressing this way only in church. I want to be this way all the time. And even that kind of more, you know, even when I started veiling back in, you know, 2018, I really thought that head covering was really beautiful just in daily life. And I wanted to do it. But again, I was like, I don't really know anyone who does this. Everyone's going to think I'm weird. Like, I don't want it. So it took me until this year to pull the trigger on that as well. So it's just been a whole, it's been a journey.
You know, you bring up head covering here, and you know, speaking of the Latin Mass, it's really big there, and I think that's a good thing, and I think one of the reasons why is the solemnity of it. It's very solemn. You know that you're dealing with something sacred and holy, so you feel like you need to have something. As far as your appearance, what you're wearing needs to reflect that. I'm reminded of this lady who I was sitting. I think it was Eucharistic adoration in middle of the day, so around noon or so, weekday, and a lady comes through the side door. I don't know if she was trying to talk to somebody and ask them a quick question, but she came through the side door. She's dressed just in a running outfit,
right?
You know, really high shorts and almost nothing on but maybe a sports bra. And um and this is a really nice old school, you know, 200-year-old Catholic church, so it's very solemn in its appearance. And when she walked in, she hesitated and she said, oh, I don't need to be in here dressed like this. She had she probably is not even a Catholic, but at least she had enough sense to know, wow, there's something sacred going on here, and it should be reflected in my appearance. You know, I should reflect that. I should be respectful in the way that I appear. And I thought that was very profound. And I think that that's something beautiful that a lot of people experience when they come to the Latin Mass. They see something very solemn, and so they want it to be reflected in their appearance. So they're open to head coverings and things like that. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Why do you think that so many people are hesitant? So many women are hesitant these days, especially Christians, to have head coverings, to be modest in appearance, even at the Mass. Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's strange to me because it was something that just immediately, as soon as I became Catholic, I thought of like, I knew, I kind of had just the image in my head of like a mantilla. I mean, I wear different kinds of veils. Like I'll wear like a scarf, like a hijab style veil or something like that. Sometimes I change it up, but I had that image in my head, right, of those beautiful Catholic, the kind of Spanish mantilla. Um, so it was always something that I found really beautiful. But you're right, there does seem to be a certain resistance to it. I think that a lot of it is simply that. It's hard for me to understand because I'm coming into this much later, where a lot of women of my generation are very open to it. I feel like a lot of the people I know, the main reason they don't want to is because they feel like they'll stick out and look dumb, not because they think there's something, demeaning about it or something like that. But I wonder about the women of my mother's generation who, do they kind of see it as, this kind of freedom and empowerment of, oh, now that, we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to fast on Fridays. We don't have to cover our hair. That was all gone with the old canon law, right?
Yeah. Right.
And of course, I think a big factor, of course, we can't deny is that when you make something merely optional and it's no longer, part of the rules, obviously that a lot of people are just going to drop it. I'm not really making an argument one way or the other. I'm not saying that I'm not denying the church has the right to do that. I'm not saying anyone's sinning by not veiling, but I do really, really encourage it. And I think it really helped to shape my faith. I think that is one of the many turning points that I noticed in my life. And and then I was, just in the novus ordo. And even then I noticed that I could focus better, especially in this very guitar, very, modern mass that I was going to. Cause, again, didn't have a car. I just happened to live by it. And I just like, okay, I can kind of, you just feel really connected to God. And I also really related it myself to just what else is veiled in the church. It made me feel very special, and I kind of thought, and I was like, I'm a mother, I have a 4-year-old son. And I think the fact that women exclusively, not men, can cooperate with God in that very direct way of bearing life, right? Of being tabernacles of life in a real way that we actually, bear children in our wombs. I think that is a beautiful thing. And I think that when someone explained that connection to me, like we veil the tabernacle, right? With our Lord and the Blessed Sacrament, and then we veil women, I didn't really see how that could possibly be demeaning. I think that's really, really, really beautiful.
I love your analogy there. The tabernacle. I think you said tabernacle of women. What was that? The phrase?
Tabernacle of life is, I think, the phrase. Someone explained it to me. I'm not sure where I heard that, but I think it's very.
That's awesome.
Apt.
That in making that connection with the tabernacle and the tabernacle veil. That's something new to me, but that's a connection that
you think
is very profound. I think that's excellent. A very, very good point to make. And of course, Mary is the ultimate, if you will, tabernacle of life.
Absolutely.
Because Jesus tabernacled among us, as John 1 puts it, in her womb. And so, women are to imitate that. So that's a very good connection that you brought up there. And you also made an observation that I've noticed as well. And you're talking about here about, some of the older generations. I think of my parents' generation, they were very much opposed to any kind of formality and authority, kind of coming out of that hippie era.
Hippies,
I think that they push against anything formal, anything with authority. It's just something that belongs to that generation. They might not even be thinking about it, but it's just this disposition that they have that it seems like maybe some of the younger people now, they don't really have that. They're a little bit more open to having things modest, to having reverence. For example, I've seen a lot of the good liturgies, a lot of the healthy parishes that have good liturgies, they have a lot of young people. It seems that young people are attracted to that. So hopefully that older generation
eventually sees it, right?
Yeah. And these younger generations seem to be going in a different direction. But, I want to ask some more questions, but I want to give everybody else, an opportunity here. We have William, and also Eric was able to join us.
Oh,
so William,
okay. Great.
Go ahead and give us your comments and questions, and I'll chat with you in a bit.
But is he still there?
Yeah, you able to hear us, William?
Yeah, I hear you clearly. I didn't know if you were going to Eric or me. I apologize.
Oh, no, go ahead, William.
Wonderful, wonderful. I apologize for that. I've really been enjoying this conversation. And I really wonder, you said a lot of really wonderful things about our Blessed Mother, and I totally agree with you. I wonder if you talked a little bit about how the rosary helped bring you to the faith. Could you maybe touch upon that a little bit? Did maybe did Our Lady of Fatima play a role at all in helping really bring you to the Catholic Church? Could you maybe touch upon that a little bit?
That's interesting that you mentioned that. Our Lady of Fatima is actually, I really have a strong devotion to that particular event. I want to name my first daughter after Sister Lucy, if we have a daughter, Lord willing.
Wow.
So that's something I'm really connected to. But it wasn't until it's one of those things where I kind of realized what God was doing with that in hindsight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So growing up, I've heard very vaguely about Fatima. I was raised Orthodox, and then when I kind of left and I kind of explored Protestantism a little bit, but never really bought the Sola Scriptura stuff or any of that. And there were certain things I didn't connect to. However, I never really heard the real story. I kind of heard the Mary supposedly came to these shepherd kids and like told them to pray or whatever. I always thought the rosary was really beautiful. I grew up thinking of it as a positive thing. Like I was never raised that, the rosary, Orthodox shouldn't pray that. That's terrible. Because, my dad or whoever would be like, well, it's a beautiful prayer. What's wrong with that? But it wasn't until after I started attending this church that I was mentioning. I started attending this church that I was mentioning, and I would go up after every mass, and I would always pray in front of the statue of Our Lady. And then another friend of mine told me about Marian consecration. And when she told me, I was just like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that. And the first date that was a Marian feast day was May 13th, which is, I believe, the anniversary of, I think, the first apparition at Fatima. It's some kind of very important Fatima anniversary. But I didn't really know anything about it. I just kind of was like, oh, it's a feast day. I can do this 33 days consecration thing. So I did it. And then as that happened, while I was undergoing that journey, I started learning about Our Lady of Fatima because I had a kind of reason to look into it. And then there just kept being all of these little connections. One of the biggest ones being, I had no idea that the church I was attending was Queen of the Most Holy Rosary, and that the main statue of the parish was Our Lady of Fatima. I didn't know that. I didn't know what she looked like. So I was just, I was literally going every day in front of this statue, praying. And that's, Michael was saying earlier, that just wanting to imitate Our Lady. And that's something that it just was very clear to me as soon as I came to the church, like imitate Our Lady. I didn't have trouble with the Marian beliefs because, I was raised Greek Orthodox, and there's a lot of love for Our Lady. So I didn't have any kind of like mental baggage to get over. I mean, there's some differences, of course, that, I obviously fall on the Catholic side of, but there wasn't that hostility. And Our Lady played a huge role in my conversion. And I think after I did that consecration, it just really took off. And now, I've prayed the rosary every single day since the nice secretary at that parish handed me a little plastic glow-in-the-dark rosary and a little pamphlet with the prayers. And I would like sit there every day, like trying to memorize the prayers. And I thanks be to God, I've done it every single day since. And I just hope I'll continue.
And really, I've really got to say that your words are very inspiring. They're incredible, very, very inspiring. It really reminds me a whole lot about a lot of the early, very virtuous women in the church. We frequently talk about early church fathers, but at times we seem to forget that there were women played a very crucial role in the early church as well. In fact, at times there are great philosophers in the church that even dub a number of women in the early church as early church mothers. Indeed, the great Cappadocian fathers were very, very influenced by women, and those women sought to lead and live virtuous lives in the model of our Blessed Mother. And I really have one thing that comes to mind, and I'd like to really get your thoughts on it. One thing you frequently hear levied against Catholicism, and really not only Catholicism, but perhaps Christianity at large, is that, and it's a canard, that the Catholic faith is misogynistic, hates women, brings women down. But when you unveil those kind of arguments and you realize that in Catholicism, and I want to be fair, Orthodoxy by and large as well, we make the clear argument from a biblical and historical standpoint that the greatest creature that God created is our Blessed and Immaculate Mother. Can you maybe perhaps give your thoughts? How would you describe true Christian femininity? And how would you reply to somebody saying that Catholicism is a misogynistic faith?
Well, as for true Christian femininity, I think, I'm still figuring it out. I'm far from perfect. I think that there is this very frustrating tendency where a lot of people will just make it all extremely subjective to the point of meaninglessness, right? Like, well, it's just as good to be feminine and having this high flying career or being a stay-at-home mom. Like, there's no difference between this, that, and the other, that because there are some female saints who had a kind of unique role, therefore, that doesn't really matter what women choose and they can just do whatever they want. The same kind of goes for modesty, right? Where it's just, it's all just cultural. As long as you're slightly more dressed than the average woman on the street, you're good, which obviously cannot be the case. Like our society's standards are so low at this point.
Unfortunately.
So I think there's that, but then there's this other kind of tendency that I do sometimes see on the more conservative traditional side, where it can become a kind of arbitrary kind of thing where it's just, you're not feminine enough because you speak too loudly. I hear this kind of thing, right? Or you're too argumentative. It's like, well, it's sorry, I'm not perfect. I admit that Our Lady probably wouldn't, ever get in as feisty debates as I do. And maybe I'm just imperfect in that way. But I also think that, we can acknowledge that there are some standards that, the church guides us into, what is in line with how God made women, what is in line with our nature, and what truly makes us happy. We can acknowledge some of those things. Like, I really, really think it's important to, put for your family first. I think women, if you have children, that you have an obligation to put them above other things. And, that can be hard. I know that that can be hard. So there are these certain things that we can look to from the church, that because the church has been around. It knows what makes us happy, because our Lord knows what makes us happy. But that isn't to say that we need to just put everything down to this really simple list. How people say, oh, well, you do this for modesty. Show me the document that says you can only wear skirts that go to your ankles. And it's like, well, that's going too far the other way. And I'll see people argue that. And like, well, no, that's not what the document says. You're just you're proving too much at this point. You're saying there's an objective standard, but then you're going way too far as to what that is. And as for your second question, which I think I remembered, was, what would I say to people who think the Catholic Church is misogynistic? It's interesting to me personally, because I really think one of the reasons that I kind of grew up and became a Christian is that I realized the problems with feminism very early. As a teenager, I kind of looked at a lot of these common claims and just kind of was like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't represent my experience at all. I don't feel like men don't care what I have to say. I don't feel like, I'm just constantly objectified. And I don't really think that it's oppressive that, women, until recently stayed home with their kids, all these kind of things. I was just kind of like, that doesn't seem right to me. I didn't agree. Even though I kind of became more wishy-washy on the issue, I was definitely raised pro-life. And, even at my, least fervent in my pro-life beliefs, I still never thought that, this was some great thing for female empowerment or anything like that. Right. So the fact that I could see some of those claims is that, when I became a Catholic and I realized what people thought of as misogynistic, it's difficult, because I would say that if your standard of what is misogynistic is based on, American feminists in the 21st century, the church is absolutely misogynistic. Yeah. The problem is that is not a real standard, because it's become a meaningless term. It literally just means if you're against what the feminist consensus is, and if you are not in lockstep with that, then you're a traitor to your gender. Anyway, so I just try. It's hard. It's not really even the kind of thing that I usually will defend the church on, because they don't view femininity fundamentally in the same way as a Christian would. Yep. And I wish I knew more how to kind of bridge that gap, I guess. But for me personally, it was pretty easy.
Your comments have been fantastic, and I can't emphasize enough. I can't emphasize enough how grateful we are to have you on the show, to hear your voice is very unique, very important, a perspective that I really greatly appreciate. Being the father to a little girl, I think your words are very very powerful. They're very inspiring, And I do have more questions, but I want to pass it over to my brother Eric. But before I pass it over, I want to ask you maybe one more thing. It's very curious because it really does seem to me like you've done your homework, and it's fantastic. Is there any other, perhaps virtuous woman that has inspired you along the way, other than our Blessed Mother? Now, I know there's incredible women like Judith and Saint Monica, but perhaps there's some other woman that may come to mind. And if not, you can say, you know what, I don't really quite remember right now, and I'll get back to you. But off the top of your head, is there maybe another incredibly virtuous woman throughout church history that has maybe impacted you in any way whatsoever?
Well, as for female saints, again, I really, right back to my connection with Fatima, I really felt so inspired by Saint Jacinta, and then of course Sister Lucy, I think, is still a servant of God as far as I know. I think she will be a saint eventually, but be canonized as a saint. She would already be one, but I really was so inspired by their lives, because even as these children, these young children, they still had this just wonderful, I don't know. I just really relate to the way that, if you look at them, if you look at those children, those shepherd children, they were doing, they were doing real work, somewhat in some sense, man's work, that they're out there in their, long skirts, right. And they're going around and they're literally herding sheep. But they still had that understanding of just a Christian culture. So part of it is not just them as people, but also the culture that surrounded them, and just that it's just, I wish sometimes that I could just step back in time and take a look at what things were like. And, even then Our Lady was warning people that, fashions were changing and things were getting difficult, and souls are falling to hell like snowflakes and all this sorts of stuff. And, and I look back and I'm like, things looked pretty nice in 1917 compared to now. But yeah, I think there's a lot of women through Christian history, and then also just personal friends in my life who really just encouraged me and gave me the courage to try and just be what I really felt God was calling me to be, instead of being scared. And a big thing that held me back was I was scared that I wouldn't find a husband, as dumb as that sounds, because now I'm married to a wonderful guy who, really supports the way that I dress and all of that.
Yeah.
But, it sounds ridiculous, but when you're in my generation, I think especially, your whole life, you're raised competing with other women to be the most attractive, the hottest girl in the room. And that's how you get attention. And no matter whether you not it's illogical, there is that part of it that is just ingrained almost, that you have to compete, you have to be the most attractive. And so much of that is how you present yourself kind of in a sexual way. So even when I was dressing, relatively modestly, I still had that fear that I was like, wait a minute, if I let go of using my body at all, how will I ever, any man is going to find me is going to be some like weirdo who likes women wearing potato sacks. And I realized that, wow, that's what's holding me back. I need to do what's right for God, and he can bring a man if he wants to. And then unsurprisingly, I was totally wrong anyway, and it worked out. Sorry, that wasn't your question. But.
No, it was great. You gave a great answer. That you really you nailed it perfectly, and I greatly appreciate your taking your time to share this insight with us. And I look forward to talking to you again in a bit. I do want to pass it over to my brother Eric.
Hi, Stephanie. Sorry for being late here. I had trouble getting my wife's Apple laptop up. I'm still trying to get used to this. So,
you will. I love the Apple laptop. I'm not going back.
Yeah, well, I'm just appalled. Listening. I didn't know what to expect when we were going to have you on, but just listening to your answers and the way you're talking right now, it's nothing short of a miracle that you had this church 2 minutes down the road. You were, you're born in this modern, culture like all of us, and I was actually raised in the Catholic Church. Right. I left in my teens, but kind of like your experience in the Orthodox Church, I had that just this Hispanic cultural Catholic environment. So yeah, you did have the women with the veils, but it wasn't always about Jesus Christ, and it was just kind of like a cultural thing. But for God to bring you into this modern world with this desire for tradition and modesty and piety, and filling your mind with the content of all this, all these splendid truths of the past, it's nothing short of a miracle.
Praise God. I mean, I feel that way too. It's all by the grace of God. It took a lot of different things, a lot of different kind of stuff that's come together that I've talked about in some other times when I've spoken about my conversion, if anyone's interested in that. But yeah, I mean, it is hard to go from this completely other world. And even once I started to realize the truth of the Catholic faith, because that's what it was all based on. I really, ever since I was a kid, I had this desire for truth. I would kind of like let it fall apart at times, and I would just be like, we'll figure out the truth later. I just want to have fun. But it was always there. I never believed that two contradictory things could both be true. I always knew there had to be one truth. I just didn't know what it was and couldn't always be bothered to care. And when I found it, that was just something that was when I really realized how much of it is grace and how much of it is God, sanctifying me even from those early days, because it's just this weird gradual thing. I would kind of, when I look at how even the simplest thing of how I dressed when I first started going to a Catholic church to what I kind of realized over time. And I just kind of started thinking just, like Michael was saying earlier, that there's this reverence, there's something sacred here. And that I just felt this just compulsion to be more reverent in my clothing. And I know I get a lot of flack for saying those kinds of things, because a lot of people have this weird thing where they assume that modesty can only be internal, and that not only does the external factors of modesty have nothing to do with it, but it actually negates it. If you're too modest on the outside, you're just you must be rotten and terrible on the inside.
I think
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, and I think God communicates that even in some of the more modern churches. Like, for example, when I brought my wife into the Catholic Church, we went to a regular novus ordo, and she was just struck with awe over what she saw. I mean, if a Latin mass goer went to there, he'd probably find all kinds of problems. But my wife went from absolutely nothing, to this, and it was still something that it kind of went through her bones. Just
beautiful.
Just the solemnity and the focus on the liturgy and on the centrality of God and all these things. That leads to the other question I had. You seem like such an erudite person. Like, you've studied. You were even before you came to the Catholic Church. You seem to be like a real think tank here. What?
Oh, no. Don't ask me any hard questions now. I didn't mean to give that impression. No.
This will all be 9 out of 10 level strength. So don't worry. Did you consider Protestantism at all? Because I know you had your Orthodox background, so that was just something that was like, there's just no chance.
Well, okay, so I had an Orthodox background, so it's kind of like what you were saying with your wife realizing that beauty in the Blessed Sacrament and all of that, even though you were just going to a normal Novus Ordo that comparatively to a Latin Mass might be like you said, you might see some problems in it. For me, I went from a beautiful Greek Orthodox liturgy to being a teenager, and I started going to a Protestant youth group, largely for social reasons, because I had zero Orthodox friends. I have way more Orthodox friends now than I ever did growing up, but I started going to this youth group, and that version of church that they saw as church was, to me, it was literally like going to a concert and like a motivational speech. Like, I don't mean that to be flippant, but not all Protestants have this exact same thing. Of course, I'm talking about my experience in non-denominational kind of Protestantism. But if you're coming from that background, the Catholic Church is going to be this really amazing thing. So for me, I went from the very reverent Orthodox liturgies to this very, very, I went to these youth groups and I kind of tried to be a Protestant, but I could never accept some of the basic teachings. Like Sola Scriptura, I have literally found ridiculous since I was 10 years old. It just doesn't make sense to me. It still doesn't. I struggle sometimes to not lose my patience with people when I'm trying to discuss it with them, because to me, it's just so clear that it doesn't make any sense that it's hard for me to even humble myself a little bit. And, because it is just by the grace of God. I really don't think that everyone who believes it is an idiot and I'm a genius or anything like that. but yeah, so when I kind of left all Christianity, just kind of lived a very secular life, I've explored other religions. I've explored Judaism, I've explored Islam, and again, my conversion story is kind of long. A lot of the reason I came back to the Catholic Church was through learning about Islam from a counter jihad perspective. That's what kind of led me back. But when I hit that point, when I realized I needed Jesus Christ, I knew my options were Catholic or Orthodox, because like you said, the sola scriptura thing, I just couldn't get with that. And I didn't see how I could be a Protestant if I didn't and couldn't believe that. So from there, that was kind of how I stumbled into a Catholic church. Part of it was this kind of weird chance. I came back from this trip that I was on, which was a counter jihad training course. That's a whole long story, but it was there that I kind of had my moment where I decided, okay, I need God. And I came back, and the Sunday rolled around, and I called my dad and I was like, can I go to church with you? My dad's Orthodox. He still is. He's an Orthodox subdeacon. And he was like, you want to go to church? Of course we can go to church with you. I'll pick you up. And that Sunday there was freezing rain, and he lives way out in the country, and he couldn't get to me, and he couldn't go to church at all because the roads were, nightmare. So I just looked at my son. It was like a February morning. It was miserable and cold. And I just knew I had to go to church that day. I hadn't made a decision yet, hadn't made a decision about the Catholic Church, nothing at all. I was still kind of in this place where I was like, well, God, God doesn't care. It's got to be one of those two, but I'll figure it out. And I walked, I had passed this Catholic church literally hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I looked at my 2-year-old at the time, and I was like, well, bundle up. We're going to the Catholic church. Cause I was like, I'm not going to go to a Protestant church. I need to be near Christ. And I believed that, even as an Orthodox person, I still believe that the Catholic church did have real sacraments in some sense. So I was like, well, we're going to go there where Jesus is. And I walked in those doors into this very modern, very novus ordo parish that I frankly would not have chosen based purely on aesthetics, knowing nothing at the time. And I walked in, and I literally burst into tears because I just knew that Christ was there. And that's kind of prompted me to actually seriously look at the differences between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. And I think, I had to think it through. But yeah, I think Steve Ray's book, Upon This Rock on the Papacy, really helped me at that time. And I really read it, and I was like, I think I'm going to become Catholic. And that's kind of how that turned out. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it when our guests dig into their own rabbit holes. There's all kinds of
I'm good at that. I'm very Greek. That hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah. So Protestantism was out of the question, but then you mentioned Eastern Orthodoxy, which is a particular interest of mine.
Mm-hmm, I know.
and so
how I found you.
Yeah, and that's just interesting how you went from the Orthodox Church. Granted that you were
right. I left it before.
That was your family heritage and all. But what we see today, I don't think it's. Oh, God bless you. I don't think that it's as seen in the world today as much. You don't go on YouTube and see Orthodox conversions to Catholicism. You always see Catholic, Protestants saying
going one or the other.
Right. But there is a small exodus. I think it's happening, trickling. Some Catholics are basically tired of what's going on in the church. Mm-hmm. And so Orthodoxy, almost without even studying Orthodoxy, it almost comes up as the only other alternative.
Right. It has an appeal.
It has that appeal. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, if you could elaborate, maybe, feel free to do so or not. Was there anything beyond Steve Ray's book that helped you in that particular area? Well,
I don't remember all the stuff that I read at the time. For me, it's kind of like the Protestant thing with sola scriptura. I kind of looked at, I am not smart enough to make a decision about whether the filioque is right or not on like a philosophical basis. I am not smart enough to figure that out. I don't think God is forcing each individual believer to have to be smart enough to figure that out. So, in all these kind of related issues, these kind of related issues, and, certain differences about Our Lady's Immaculate Conception, things like that. These relatively small differences, between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. So, I knew some of these things growing up. Like it wasn't like I had no idea what Catholics believed. But what I kind of really realized very quickly when I was looking at the two churches was it all really stands or falls in the papacy. If the papacy is true, then I have to be Catholic. If it's not, then I don't have to be Catholic. I'm not saying it's exactly the same as sola scriptura, but there is that kind of thing where I don't really think the Catholic Church can really hold up its claims if the papacy is complete nonsense, even if I admit that it is complicated and it's not, like you have very wisely said many times that I've heard and read that, anybody who's just looking for, sorry, there are ducks quacking outside my door. If anyone is looking for this just magic piece of paper that tells you exactly what you want to hear, you're probably not going to find it. And it takes a little more than that. So Steve Ray was just, I started, you said there's not a lot of stuff out there. When I first started looking, I'd be on YouTube and I was like, Orthodox convert to Catholicism, Catholic convert to Orthodox. Like I'm just trying to look stuff up. I think I found James Lakutis. There's a couple videos on like Sensus Fidelium. I don't think I found you at that point, because I'm assuming that was pre-Reason and Theology. You had your other stuff, but I don't think I would have necessarily found you on YouTube. Yes, I read I read some stuff by James Lakutis, listened to his conversion story. I listened to Deacon something Pasquella. He was also on like Journey Home. Like there's a few things I listened to. Right. So I just kind of tried to find everything I can. And then I happened upon a Lizzie Rize video and we had our interesting conversation since this time. But, in that video, she was just talking about the papacy in some short video. She mentioned this book and I was like, okay, this might be an interesting like starting point. That's not, too much for me to understand. And I tore through it twice in like a couple of weeks, maybe less. And my copy's like full of notes and stuff because I was just so interested in it, and then I kind of looked up more stuff and that was a big help to me. But since then I've maintained an interest in it because obviously my dad is still Orthodox. I think that Orthodox people are obviously our closest family in Christ. I think that my biggest issue as the whole trad Vatican II thing is that we completely just threw the Orthodox out with the trash to cater to like Protestants who don't believe in anything remotely like what we do. So it's still really an interest of mine. And now I listen to Timothy Flanders has fantastic stuff on that topic. You have fantastic stuff on that topic. And there's a lot more out there. Thank God. I'm glad that I kind of became Catholic now that there's the internet and there's actually some information, because I honestly don't think 20 years ago it'll be very easy to, see why you should convert as someone who's Orthodox.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for your kind words. I think, I think that it's very encouraging to see, you've got such an interest in the humble path of modesty, you're thinking on morality and all these things. And then you're also diving into some big topics that we don't always see females talking about. Like when we look at our Reason and Theology, the viewership, look, I don't know how much, I don't want to insult anybody who's watching, but we get a lot of fake accounts. So we don't even know if they're male or female, but I think it's mostly a male audience.
Right.
And you seem
not
to be
90% males.
Yeah. That's not opposite of femininity though.
No.
My wife, my wife is she's very godly, virtuous woman, but she, once she gets her mind in some of these things and she can talk about it,
Right.
That's not anti-femininity, right?
I would say no. And that's really funny that you bring that up, because I actually think about that. It's just kind of one of those like God sense of humor things that I always find hilarious. I'm this person who, like I said, I called myself an anti-feminist long before I was a Christian. I had a lot of problems with a lot of the basic stuff that I was hearing from feminists for a very long time. I felt like it was very demeaning towards me as a person. I hated the idea that I would do something and it'd be like, oh, read this because she's a woman, like somehow that means anything, right? Like that should elevate me over anybody else. And then I'm always, I really encourage a lot of stuff that is seen as very retrograde these days, things like I homeschool my son. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have no interest in having a career. That's my husband's job. I don't want to do it. So I'm pretty I'm kind of like backwards in that way. And then I have this thing where I have I'm in this kind of like traditional Catholic, like Jesus nerd space where it's all guys. Like it really is very many men. I really don't know a lot of women who are into this stuff. Like even just in any space that I'm talking about. My friend Bree Dale is a Catholic journalist who's a female, and she was a huge help to me when I first converted. She introduced me to Steve Skojic. So I got my first Catholic writing job, and so I owe her the world in so many ways. And but like really like her and then a couple of her friends, I struggle to think of very many people. There are Catholic women who are in media in some way. I just reviewed a really good book about Our Lady of Good Help over at 1 Peter 5, written by a lovely Catholic woman. So there's a lot of stuff that women are doing. But I think this specific kind of space, like how many women have been on Reason and Theology? I just don't know how.
I think we had Lizzie on the show.
There you go, right? It's me and Lizzie. That's how it seems to be. That's so funny. I love it. That's hilarious. And it's like I'm literally trying to talk to these women and be like, hey, ladies, like respect your husbands, just be traditional and try and be humble and feminine. And then here I am, like just in the men's club all the time. And I'm not trying to, but you're right. I don't think I'm mostly kidding. I don't think there's anything inherently non-feminine about that. There's obviously very intelligent female saints. I'm sure Saint Teresa of Avila was no slouch. Saint Catherine of Siena. There's a lot of very, very, very intelligent women in the history of the church. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I also think that for some women, I think there is something that I do think it speaks to our nature in some way. I don't think it's a coincidence that 90% of your audience is men. I think that there's a tendency that men are kind of more interested in certain elements of Christian discussion. And I think that's okay too. If you just, if you're more concerned with just hanging out with your kids and reading a good novel, I don't look down on that at all. Sometimes I think my life would be a lot easier and quieter if I would just shut up about some of this stuff.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't know.
It's a compulsion.
I sometimes wonder if I'll be much happier in the future if I just kind of read fiction and.
Right. Me too. I've tried it. Doesn't work.
We're brought into controversy so much, right? I mean, everything is so controversial, And
yeah, if you're on Twitter, I have been canceled like so many times at this point. I am the most canceled, one of the most canceled people on the internet, it feels like sometimes. Even before Catholicism, even when I was just writing in politics, I was so canceled, just canceled all the time. And yeah, earlier this year, I kind of did that when this whole COVID thing started. Just life was extremely stressful. I was trying to get married and having all these issues with my diocese, and there was just stress on stress on stress. And I don't know, I can't remember what the exact thing was, but something just, I had a point where I snapped. I was just kind of like, I can't take this anymore. I cannot take being criticized anymore. I cannot take people hating me based on, misinterpreting what I'm saying. And I basically disappeared off social media and writing and everything for like 2 months. And I really thought I could quit. And that was when I knew it was okay to come back. Because I really was like, I could leave and be happy. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. My husband was like, yeah, I knew you were going to come back. There's no way you were going to quit. You love the fight too much.
Yeah,
so
that's great. Well, I'll tell you,
I don't know.
You people like you are carrying the torch, and I just encourage you to keep at it, and we're excited to see what God does in your life from here forward. So I'm done, Michael. We could pass it over and maybe take it to the audience. I don't know.
I have a question before we go to the chat questions. Looking at women in the secular world here, kind of shifting gears a little bit. And no, obviously I know this isn't indicative of everybody. There's always exceptions. I'm just talking about general trends with young women in the secular world. My impression is, and I'm basing this off of a lot of things. Let me give you one example. Just recently, Joe Biden did I don't know what it was, a chat or video chat with Cardi B.
Oh, no, I've seen it.
Former stripper.
They call me Joey B.
Cardi B. Yeah.
Right.
Now, why would he do that? Well, because he knows that she's really popular among young women.
For some reason.
Young women want to become strippers because of people like Cardi B. They think, oh, wow, she made so much money and blah, 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 and she became famous. So young people are attracted to that right now. My question is this. What would you say to people who are of that mentality, who have this idea of what a woman should be today, and it's that? What would you say to a woman who has that mindset? It might call them to a higher standard. What would you say? It
I
might
would say, right. Well, I'm not sure I'm that successful at that. I have two radical feminist sisters, so I haven't been very successful in my own family, let alone among strangers. I pray for them. That's the main thing I think that I would try and do with these people. And I would always try and tell someone that I'll pray for them and that I care about them. But I think the biggest thing is that this applies to so many situations and to men and women, especially of my generation. There is this idea of instant gratification that is just so ingrained into us that everything has to be right now and whatever feels good in the moment. And I think even if you are a complete heathen and aren't necessarily looking for God at that time, I do think some people can be reasoned with there's two things. First, I would say that, you need to think about where you want to be on your deathbed, because that is ultimately where you will be. I would rather be on my deathbed with my family by my side than in my beautiful, expensive house that I bought by stripping alone. Yeah. So that's one point that I would make, is to think about long-term what you want to be, because you know what? Cardi B is not going to have her body forever. She is going to get old and wrinkly and ugly like everyone else. I'm already getting tons of gray hair. This is temporary. It's not going to last. Whatever beauty we have is completely fleeting for literally everyone, even the most beautiful, wonderful looking woman on earth. And the other thing I would say, if a person has a child or has children in their lives that they care about, this is something I'm always, kind of try to say to my brother-in-law who has a daughter, who's my, wonderful niece, that would you want your daughter to dress this way? Would you want your daughter to do this for a job? And I don't know, really, unless you are so far gone that you just have completely accepted it to the point where I really think there's demonic influence in your life that you need to deal with to get out of it. I think that most people can step back and say, wait a second, no, I do not want my little girl, dancing on a pole. And, if you don't want that for your kid, why do you want it for you? Right? Why do you want it for yourself? Right. Yeah, that's all I got.
It's a really, really good answer. And sounds like we have something in common there as far as siblings. So totally know where you're coming from there. This one is from Hercule. Thank you. This one is from Hercule, and thank you for your super chat there. He says, is there a difference between Catholic and Protestant views on modesty and views of the sexes? Also, doesn't culture and country have an impact on modesty standards?
I think that it's a difficult question to answer in terms of Protestants versus Catholics, because it's very, very specific as to which denomination of Protestantism. There are a few Protestant denominations that are just way better on actual practice of modesty than really any significant number of Catholics that I know of in the present day. Protestant groups like Mennonites or whatever. Even some of I think it's pretty common with Pentecostal women to wear, to emphasize modesty. But then, of course, there are Protestant denominations that there's a bit of a difference we have to think about as well when we're talking about modesty in daily life versus modesty in church. I think that, we can say that there probably are certain Protestant denominations that are doing a way better job with modesty in total. I think that if we look at how Catholics, just conservative, normal Catholics dress at Mass versus how normal Protestants dress at Mass, there's a reason that there's the meme of like the youth pastor on a skateboard with like spiky hair and jeans, right? Because that's a thing that happens at like certain Protestant services. And that does happen with Catholics as well. But I do think even in the mainstream of Catholicism, if you're not necessarily going to the trads, I still think there is an understanding of some reverence in church. It's getting worse. I hope it'll get better. I mean, it's, and as for the second point, I think that, certain parts of modesty, I'm not denying that culture has an impact. But I do deny the idea that it's entirely cultural. I think it was Pius XII that said there's an absolute norm that must be preserved in modesty. And if we want to look for where that is, there's various things that we can look to. I wrote a whole in-depth article on this exact thing, the kind of objective standards of modesty according to the church. I did this really in-depth kind of Family News. If anyone is interested in that, I'll happily send it to you, where I kind of go over all the documents. And, but at the, the conclusion I come to is that ultimately, it's not just the cultural variance, but the fact that as much as there are objective parts of modesty and how we dress, there are certain things that will never be modest, no matter how much the culture changes. There is also, like I said in the beginning of the show, there is a need to see modesty more than anything else. How I try and look at it is, how am I emulating Our Lady? Am I honoring Our Lady? Am I glorifying God? And that is the most reliable rubric, because that can change. If you look at how Our Lady is dressed in her various apparitions, she dresses according to the culture, but she's always very modest.
I'm thinking here as far as different opinions on modesty. One of the I guess sayings that I heard, and give me your comments here and what you think about it. If what you're wearing draws attention to your face, it's modest. If it draws attention to your body, it's immodest. What do you think of that rule of thumb?
I think that's actually a very good start. And that really goes into how I feel when I've had male friends that have actually really told me kind of a version of that. I've had male friends say, you know what, I love talking to you because I don't have to worry like, oh, am I accidentally looking where I don't want to be looking? Because, it's men are very visual. I think all of the guys on this show get that more than I probably would. But I think a lot of women don't get that. They don't get that it's not just a matter necessarily of a guy just being able to just look at your face no matter what. You can make it, it can be easy or it can be difficult. And I really noticed that men treat me just overall differently, including secular men, since I've started really trying to think about modesty. And I think that's part of it, is that I really, really try and dress in a way that makes you see my face and not just the rest of my body.
Right.
It's a good idea. It's a good start.
This one is from Indie Irish. Have you heard about the papal decree by Pius XI on Marian modesty? And if so, what do you think about this? And do you think that it's authoritative as a standard today? This is from Kathy.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. I am very, very familiar with that. I definitely cited that in my article. I think I have it actually pulled open on my computer because I wasn't sure how much these guys were going to pelt me with difficult questions. So I was like, I'm going to be prepared. I think that it's authoritative in the sense that, as far as I know, it has not been abrogated by anybody. I don't think John Paul II or Pope Francis has come along and said, actually, we have something better than this. However, but you have to look at the specifics in context, right? Like, I can't remember. There's one document that says that shirts that may, extend to the elbow. And then there's another one that says that quarter sleeves are okay due to, fabric shortages or whatever. So the very fact that there is variation between, pretty, high level documents shows you that some of those things are clearly not, just completely infallible, right? It's not like there's a complete Catholic teaching on if your sleeves have to reach your wrists or not. You're not going to find a document that, infallibly for all time states that has to be the case. However, I think that the Mary-like modesty standards are fantastic and that you won't go wrong by following them. Absolutely. As far as I know, I try to follow all of them, with the possible exception, like I said, of wearing like a t-shirt length, piece of clothing when it's boiling million degrees out. But even then, that's also, I wouldn't wear that. I wouldn't really wear that to church. I usually try and cover my, to my elbow or more at church. Right. So, but it was a process for me. I think we need to the biggest thing I would say to any woman watching this who wants to try and just start moving towards that is just, give that to God, ask him for guidance, ask Our Lady to help you and to guide you, and start with Sunday Mass. Go to Sunday Mass, dress up, try and feel really beautiful, and just say, I'm going to meet the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And you will feel that, and you'll feel this joy of knowing that you are giving that best version of yourself to God. And then, from there, you'll look at how you dress in your daily life and kind of compare it to that, right? There's certain times that I'm not going to be quite as, formal, right? But I think you can always be modest and casual as well. Even as a stay-at-home mom, I'll just wear I'll wear like a denim skirt that everyone thinks is unfashionable and hates, but whatever, I like them. And a t-shirt, sometimes that's it. But I'm always trying to be as modest as I can.
Good. This one is from Thomas. What is the Christian response to the idea that more physically beautiful women are worth more other than being equal?
As in worth more than women who are less beautiful, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you're worth more because of the way you look.
Well, I think that the Christian response to that is, first of all, that, God sees the heart, primarily, and God created all of us. And, I'm somebody, just to be vulnerable for a moment on that specific issue, I'm somebody that has had a lot of struggles throughout my life with worrying about my weight. I've never had a full-blown eating disorder, but there have been times in my life when I would eat very, very little, trying to get as skinny as I could. And to this day, I still really struggle with that insecurity. I'll go to my husband and be like, make me stop eating. I feel so fat and terrible, and I joke about it now. And for the most part, I kind of, thanks be to God, have it kind of under control. But I really relate to that question, because that's how I spent most of my life feeling. And it's taken God a lot of time to heal that part of myself and that flaw. But something that's what I tell myself is that God created me the way he wanted me to be. The parts that he is concerned with are, am I healthy? Like, that's important. God doesn't want us to be, breaking our chairs and unable to, kneel at mass because we're morbidly obese, or he doesn't want me to be, so thin that I'm not gonna be able to get pregnant because I'm, pushing my body to the limit. Right. So I think that ties into general beauty as well. God made you the way you are for a reason, and, your beauty is not the most important thing. And in fact, I think it was, Saint Rose of Lima who disfigured her face because she was too beautiful? Is that, I think that's what I'm thinking of.
I don't recall. Do y'all know?
I don't recall.
I haven't heard of that one.
Okay, well, I think it was her. I always confuse her with Saint Rita, but I think Saint Rita was the one who had her.
What was that name again? What was her name again?
Saint Rose of Lima.
I was gonna throw in a quick.
Someone Google.
I was gonna throw in maybe origin. He did, but
on the male side, we know that.
But
about
he's
him.
Not a saint.
Yeah,
right.
Male,
no, so she was apparently it was definitely a female saint. I think it was her. Right. It wasn't her. Right. It was another saint. That she was really known for her beauty, and she was really seen as beautiful. And she actually disfigured her face with pepper and lime because she felt that it was a distraction. And I'm not saying that we should do that. I think that the saints obviously are very close to God and are probably united with him completely in prayer, and they know what to do. I'm not saying to make yourself ugly. There's nothing wrong with being beautiful either. It's a balance. But what is wrong is, elevating physical beauty over your soul. And I think about that sometimes. I think, would I still be able to be thankful if I had, horrible disfigurements from a car accident? And, I married a man who I think would still absolutely love me the same. And so my husband and God, I think both of them are going to care about me as a human being, as a whole person. And then besides that, if there's nothing wrong with trying to look beautiful in a certain way, as long as you are not trying to hide what God made.
Amen.
Yeah. Oh, you're kind of quiet.
Michael.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Michael, I think you unmuted.
I think your audio went down.
He's really quiet. He's low.
Yeah, I think the audio. Can't hear him at all. Very odd.
Here, just maybe I
heard him like so quiet.
He's fine. Well, in any case, yeah, we were, he brought up origin, and are you familiar with the story of origin?
No, I was going to ask, but then I got distracted thinking about St. Rose.
Yeah. Well,
tell me.
Well,
was he ugly?
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, he came from a martyr. His family was entrenched in the tradition, and if I remember, I haven't studied origin in years, but I believe he wanted to be a martyr when he was a kid, and when he got older, he got so extreme in his zeal to be sexually pure that he castrated himself.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Right.
So
there you go.
That's that would be the
extreme.
The other extreme on the opposite.
Extreme male virgin.
Yeah, and I don't even think that scientifically works in any case. So
castration.
That was a very foolish.
Y'all able to hear me?
Yeah.
I can.
There we go.
I can now. Oh, you're back. You're good. On. Golden.
It's kind of weird because I was unmuted both on the platform here and on my soundboard. I don't know. I restarted it. Glad it worked.
No reasonable explanation.
This one is from Nico Lane. Do you seek out apologetic? Oh, okay. Do you seek
Hi,
out
buddy.
apologetic moments on Twitter, or do they find you?
We've had like a multi-day conversation with a lot of Protestant friends on Twitter. I made some new friends. I like follow them. I'm like, oh, you're in the Catholic trap now. No one's gonna leave you alone ever. But it's a little bit of both. Some of them I find because people tag me in them. I think more than anything, it's because I know a lot of people who are good apologists, not necessarily because I'm a really good one. But yeah, it's a bit of both. Sometimes I'll find them and I'll kind of push back a little bit. But usually, I try not to just be like, someone says something vaguely Protestant and I go and attack them or anything like that. But yeah, we have a lot of good conversations. It's a bit of both. Sometimes I definitely feel like they find me.
This one is from Quoke Fam. What is your take on makeup? When is it appropriate? How much is too much?
Oh my goodness, all my friends are more people I know. Well, as for makeup, I used to wear makeup a lot. Anyone has seen like my really old Instagram photos or anything, like, always wearing tons of makeup. And I had pretty bad adult acne. So that was the main reason that I wore makeup for a long time is, I had such bad acne and I would try and cover that up. And then when it's all covered up, you want to put the eye makeup on to kind of complete the look. And before I knew it, I felt embarrassed to go to the grocery store without it. And when I kind of found a solution to the acne problem, I started kind of wearing less. But in any case, I think that the kind of rule of thumb that I try to think about now with makeup, is that it should be something that just kind of enhances, like I was saying earlier about beauty, that it just kind of enhances what God has actually, already given you. I find it really kind of unsettling when I go on Instagram. You find these like crazy, like Korean makeover videos where these women are like taping their eyelids and putting these giant lenses in to give them Western eyes. And they're doing all this contouring and they literally look like different people by the end. I'm not going to say that's necessarily sinful, but I don't really think that that's what we should be going for. I think it can be too much. I think that, and I think it's also just as a woman who's been through that very thing, who has been a person who feels ugly when I'm not wearing makeup, even if I'm just going to the store. I think that it's freeing to be able to just look at yourself in the mirror and be like, this is what I look like. This is who I am. So I think to me, when makeup becomes too much, you'll kind of know if you're afraid not to wear it. If you become too reliant, I think it can kind of almost become an idol to people. So that would be my advice. But generally, I'm okay with it. I don't think it's, inherently bad.
Well, we'll do one more. Indie Irish asks, the internet has created a global community. How do you think this has had an impact on femininity and modesty? And how can we use these tools to reclaim them?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it had a big impact on me personally because I am really one of the only people I know in real life who kind of dresses like I do. I have one other Catholic female friend who kind of dresses like I do, but she's really the only person I can think of that I know in real life. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And this is something I kind of push back on often because I will sometimes get kind of attacked by people. And I've seen other women who talk about modesty get attacked about this too, for posting pictures, right? Like posting like an Instagram photo in a modest outfit. Because a lot of people be like, well, isn't that immodest? Because you're posting a photo, therefore it's immodest. And, my thinking is that, there are a lot of women who have no idea, that there are other women out there who, like when I was a kid, when I was talking about at the beginning of the show, when I was, really a child, a young teenager, and I saw these women who dressed in this way, it really, it really spoke to my heart. And I would love to be that for somebody else. And I've had a few people actually reach out to me and say, hey, I decided to start wearing skirts like you do for Lent, and it really was really cool, and I'll keep doing it. Things like that. And that is the most amazing thing and I think God can use, anyone watching this, God can really use you in that way because there's such a need. There really is such a need. It's this rare thing. It's if you go on Instagram and you see a woman who's dressed modestly, it just sticks right out to you as something different, right? Something different than everything else you're seeing on social media. And I think that is really, really powerful. And and I think it's also just in a practical sense. It's without the internet, it would be a lot harder to figure out, how do I start covering my hair? What clothes do I buy? Where do I buy this? How do I not look dressed like a total fool? I'm not a fashion Instagrammer. I don't think I'm fashionable, but there are people who are more concerned with that. And I think that's fine. And the internet is a great way that you can actually learn to just do that just on a purely practical basis.
Stefanie, I really appreciate you. I really want to thank you for coming on. You are welcome on anytime. Let's do it again. Let's have another topic where you come on and we discuss it. I think that would actually be very, very helpful if you're available.
I would absolutely love to come back anytime. I had so much fun talking to you guys. I kind of feel like I already knew you guys from obsessively watching the show. So that's kind of cool now. I'm kind of tripping out.
We're humbled. We're humbled. You like to watch.
It's so cool. I really, really enjoy it. And I plan to continue, but I would absolutely love to come back anytime. There's a lot of the rabbit trail we went down today. We could totally talk about anything. And
just
thank you so much.
Shoot some topics to us and we can do it. I think that would be really fun. So throw some topics our way. We'll chat more off the air about that. But again, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Go ahead and put in a plug for anything that you're working on or any way that you want people to contact you.
Awesome. Well, we can always check out what I am kind of doing. I use Twitter the most over at Steph, STEF, M. Lozinski. I think someone mentioned it earlier, but you can find me pretty easily on Twitter or Facebook. And I'm kind of always trying to write new articles and things like that. I don't have anything too exciting going on. This was my exciting thing for like the month. But I'll definitely be posting anything new that I write there hopefully soon.
I'm glad we're becoming a highlight of people's.
Oh, this was the highlight. That's
awesome.
It was on the calendar.
I appreciate the compliment there.
The highlight.
Again, you're welcome on anytime. Let's do it again. We'll talk off the air about some dates and also topics. So everybody look forward to Stefanie being on again. We'll do it again. Again, thank you for coming on. Everyone, thank you for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, share it on your social media. Also go to Twitter and share it there because that's where evidently Stefanie is speaking the most. So go on your Twitter and definitely help spread this video. But again, thank you all for watching. Till next time. God bless.